The verse we're dealing with is from Surah 27, it's verse 30, and it details Solomon's message to the Queen of Sheba. Is that correct?
Yes, in fact, it shows how the message began. It's a letter that he sent to the Queen of Sheba, and then the Queen begins to read the letter out to her people, and she says this is how it is. It is from Solomon, and it is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which means in the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful One.
So what is the significance of starting a letter with that phrase?
Well, this is the phrase that begins every chapter of the Quran except for the 9th chapter. So it occurs 113 times at the beginning of every one of the chapters except the 9th. And now it occurs also in this particular chapter. So this is an oft-repeated phrase. As one would read the Quran, one would come across this 114 times. And as one offers the prayers during the day and night, Muslims would continue to recite this phrase at the beginning of the surahs that they recite in the prayer, short surahs as they do.
But it would appear that this phrase has been used for a very long time, since it was also used by Solomon.
Yes, apparently this is a phrase that is quite common to believers, and it has continued to be very frequently used in a variety of circumstances, even in mundane affairs. Muslims have become habitual in starting good things, at least, by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
Now, why would Muslims need to do that?
Well, first of all, there's no requirement that they must or that they should, but it is the Muslim habit to remember God as often as one can, and one of the ways of doing that, and of seeking His blessings at the same time in whatever we're embarking upon, to just simply start by mentioning His name. I'm doing this thing in the name of God, or with the name of God, and by doing so, I'm really asking God to be with me in what I'm endeavoring.
And I guess we often tell children to do that. You know, when they start something, when they start to eat, when they do certain things, we tell them to say Bismillah.
Yes. Now, in fact, in eating in particular, it is recommended to start by saying Bismillah. And there are some specific actions for which to starting with Bismillah is a recommendation, such as in making wudu, for example, washing just before the prayer. And it is a good habit to cultivate in our kids, to let them start things with Bismillah. Because if one gets into the habit of doing things in this mode of thinking, then if one is about to do something wrong, one would immediately check oneself, because as one begins to then pronounce the Bismillah, as one would do habitually, it would seem odd. How can I say the basmallah at this time? It's called the basmallah, but it's pronounced Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So if one wants to pronounce the basmallah as one would do habitually, when one goes to do something wrong, there will be an inner conflict and contradiction immediately apparent.
So in other words, by verbalizing it, you're eventually internalizing the message.
That's right, and that will inhibit one from going into the wrong path.
So what does the term Bismillah mean?
The term Bismillah simply means in the name or with the name of Allah. Allah is an Arabic word, and that is the word that is used for God in that language. For anyone who would refer to the God of Abraham. So Muslims, Jews, and Christians all refer to God in the Arabic language using the same term, Allah. Because Allah has become such a distinctive term in the Arabic language for the God of Abraham, many Muslims continue to use that name and only that name, and refuse to translate it into, let's say, the English language. Because there is a suspicion among some Muslims that if you translate that into English and use the term God, then you may inadvertently be referring to let's say, Jesus, as people may refer to Jesus as God. So in order to make it quite clear that when we say God, we do not mean Jesus, Muslims may have some hesitation using the English word God. But the flip side of that, and the negative outcome of this, is that our Christian friends, hearing us using the term Allah exclusively for God, may get the impression that we worship a different God than they do. And that would be a wrong impression, because when we speak of Allah, we're really speaking of the God of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. We're speaking about the one God, the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament, just simply God.
Going back to the verse itself, the latter part of it speaks about Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. What do those refer to then?
These are attributes of God. So we could have just simply said Bismillah, and if one is short for time or one wants to keep it simple, one can just say Bismillah, and that means the same thing. But if one wants to now expand the phrase, one would say Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. And these are two names of God being mentioned there in that formula. So it's saying that Allah is the Rahman and the Rahim. So these are two terms, both coming from the same Arabic root word, and both being intensive forms of that root word. The root word has the idea of mercy and kindness. So by applying these to God, we're saying that God is Ar-Rahman, which means something like the source of mercy, if we're to give the same sense in English, and Ar-Rahim, which would mean something like the most merciful one.
So in saying these things, are we praising God or are we asking for God's mercy?
Both. One way of approaching God and to ask for His mercy is actually to praise Him. This is why our prayers actually begin with praising Him. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik. Glory be to my Lord, and glory be to you, O Allah, and praise be to you. We say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, praise be to God, the Lord of the worlds. So we praise Him, and then we ask for favors. By beginning with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, mentioning His good qualities of kindness and mercy, we are asking now indirectly, please be merciful and kind to us.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Shabir.
You're welcome.